What did the 1950s really hide behind their polite smiles and glossy Technicolor frames? Beneath the surface of family musicals and patriotic dramas lived a darker truth. Filmmakers were testing the limits of morality and censorship. Some prints were trimmed by studios. Others vanished into vaults for decades. These are the bold films of that era that dared to go further. Welcome to the uncut versus theatrical secrets of the 1950s. Number 15. The Moon is Blue, 1953. When Otto Preminger released The Moon is Blue, audiences were not ready. The film seemed innocent on the surface, a romantic comedy about a charming bachelor and an idealistic young woman navigating love in New York. But it spoke openly about attraction and personal freedom. That was enough to ignite chaos. The Production Code Administration refused to grant its seal of approval, calling the dialogue indecent. Words that modern audiences would barely notice were considered dangerous at the time. United Artists decided to release it anyway without the seal. It was the first major American film to challenge the authority of Hollywood censorship directly. Churches denounced it. Local councils banned it. Some theaters played a cut version with entire scenes missing. Behind the scenes, Preminger stood firm against the censors, insisting his film reflected real conversations between adults. William Holden and Maggie McNamara delivered performances full of wit and innocence. The uncut version existed in Europe, while American audiences saw a toned-down edit. Over time, critics began to recognize its bravery. Today, the film feels gentle, but its defiance changed history. It signaled the beginning of the end for the Production Code. The Moon is Blue proved that even a conversation could shake an empire built on silence. Number 14. Baby Doll, 1956. Few films in the decade caused as much outrage as Baby Doll. Directed by Elia Kazan and written by Tennessee Williams, it followed a troubled marriage in the Mississippi Delta. The story revolved around a childish young woman and her lecherous husband who waited for her 20th birthday to finally claim her as his wife. The imagery was provocative for the era. The film's marketing used a single shot of actress Carol Baker lying in a crib clutching her thumb. Religious organizations erupted in fury. The Catholic Legion of Decency called it the dirtiest American movie ever made. Theaters pulled it from screens within days. Warner Brothers panicked and issued trimmed versions in some states, removing entire passages of dialogue. Behind the camera, tension boiled. Kazan and Williams faced boycotts, while Baker became a symbol of forbidden cinema. Yet major critics such as Time magazine praised its psychological honesty and realism. The contrast between its banned reputation and its artistry turned it into legend. In later years, filmmakers like Martin Scorsese cited Baby Doll as a crucial work in breaking the moral chains of Hollywood. The uncut European release revealed the raw power Kazan intended. Beneath its controversy was a film about repression and loneliness. What terrified audiences most was not the scandal, but the mirror it held up to their own desires. Number 13. The Man with the Golden Arm, 1955. Frank Sinatra shocked the world when he portrayed a car dealer struggling with addiction in The Man with the Golden Arm. Before this film, such topics were taboo in American cinema. Director Otto Preminger once again defied the production code by addressing a subject that had been buried in shadows. The story followed Frankie Machine, a man fresh out of rehab trying to rebuild his life. Sinatra's performance was raw and human, filled with trembling realism. But when censors saw it, they panicked. The code refused approval. Studio executives feared legal action. Some theaters were threatened with closure for screening it. Preminger refused to compromise. He released it without the seal. The result was a nationwide uproar. Critics called it immoral. Audiences called it revolutionary. Newspapers debated whether art should confront or conceal. Abroad, the uncut version included graphic scenes of withdrawal that American audiences never saw. Behind the scenes, Sinatra reportedly underwent exhaustive research, visiting clinics and talking to real patients. His dedication earned him an Oscar nomination and changed his career forever. More importantly, the film cracked open a door that would never close again. In its wake, the industry began questioning the moral authority of the censors. The Man with the Golden Arm turned human suffering into a cinematic weapon. It proved that the truth, no matter how painful, could no longer be contained. Number 12. The Wild One, 1953. When Marlon Brando revved his motorcycle engine in The Wild One, he created more than a rebel. He created a cultural revolution. The film depicted a gang of bikers invading a small American town, spreading fear and chaos. It was the first time post-war youth rebellion was portrayed as both dangerous and magnetic. Authorities hated it. Critics called it a threat to public morality. The British Board of Film Censors banned it outright for 14 years, calling it subversive. American towns demanded edited versions, cutting scenes of gang fights and Brando's taunting dialogue. Studio executives feared that the film might inspire real violence among teenagers. Behind the scenes, Brando's aloof performance became the template for misunderstood youth. His line, when asked what he was rebelling against, "What have you got?" defined an entire generation. The film's uncut print revealed harsher language and longer scenes of chaos, which were removed for theatrical release. Columbia Pictures nearly shelved the movie completely, but public fascination forced them to release it. Despite censorship efforts, it became a symbol for rebellion across Europe and later a midnight favorite in American revival theaters. Decades later, critics reassessed The Wild One as the birth cry of counterculture cinema. It marked the beginning of anti-heroes and moral ambiguity in American storytelling. In a decade obsessed with order, Brando's sneer was a quiet explosion that could not be silenced. Number 11. The Big Heat, 1953. Fritz Lang's The Big Heat looked like an ordinary film noir. A cop, a murder, a conspiracy. But beneath the shadows, it was one of the most ruthless indictments of corruption ever filmed. Glenn Ford played a detective who wages war against a network of mobsters and crooked officials after his wife is killed by a car bomb meant for him. The violence shocked audiences. It was stark, brutal, and direct. In one unforgettable scene, Gloria Graham's face is scalded with hot coffee, an image so disturbing that many theaters demanded cuts. The production code tried to soften it, but Lang refused. Some prints were trimmed without his consent. Behind the scenes, Columbia executives worried the film would destroy Lang's career in America. Yet he fought for the integrity of his vision, knowing that true evil could not be dressed up in elegance. The original uncut version was grittier, more violent, and more honest than the release seen by most audiences. Critics at the time were divided. Some called it sensationalism, others saw it as genius. Over time, its reputation grew until it was hailed as a masterpiece of moral fury. Today, The Big Heat stands as a reminder that the 1950s were not as clean as nostalgia suggests. Under the surface noir, directors like Lang were tearing apart the illusion of American decency. They showed that justice in that world was not divine, but human and flawed. Number 10. A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951. Elia Kazan's. A Streetcar Named Desire was already a sensation on Broadway before it came to the screen. But when it arrived in theaters, it became a battle between art and censorship, unlike anything before. The story of Blanche Dubois and Stanley Kowalski was considered too raw for the code to tolerate. The original cut included scenes of psychological torment and moral collapse that shocked preview audiences. The Catholic Legion of Decency declared it unacceptable. Warner Brothers panicked and forced Kazan to reshoot and trim key moments. 30 seconds here, a few lines there, but the effect was devastating. The theatrical release softened its edges, while the uncut version revealed the darkness that Tennessee Williams had intended. Vivien Leigh's performance as Blanche was haunting. Critics called it too intense, too revealing of the female psyche. Marlon Brando's raw masculinity made censors uneasy. The tension between them was electric, yet dangerous to conservative viewers. Behind the scenes, Kazan fought bitterly for his vision. He claimed that the studio's interference turned tragedy into melodrama. The uncut version disappeared for decades until restored in the 1990s, allowing audiences to see the film as originally shot. When revisited today, A Streetcar Named Desire feels like a primal scream from a decade of repression. Its power lies in what was once forbidden, the fragile madness of desire, guilt, and decay. The uncut version proved that truth could not stay buried forever. Number 9. The Blackboard Jungle, 1955. When The Blackboard Jungle hit theaters, it felt like an explosion. The film exposed a brutal side of American education that few wanted to see. Glenn Ford played a teacher at an inner-city school trying to control violent and disillusioned students. Among them was a young Sidney Poitier, portraying defiance and intelligence in equal measure. Audiences were stunned. Teenagers rioted in theaters. Some danced in the aisles to the opening song Rock Around the Clock, which became the first rock anthem used in a Hollywood movie. Conservative groups accused the film of glorifying juvenile delinquency. Schools banned it. Politicians demanded it be censored or withdrawn entirely. Behind the scenes, producer Pandro S. Berman and director Richard Brooks fought the censors tooth and nail. They wanted to show what real classrooms were becoming in post-war America, filled with anger, poverty, and lost futures. But MGM forced them to tone down racial tension and profanity. The uncut print was reportedly far harsher, with more explicit depictions of classroom violence and racism. In Britain, the film was temporarily banned after reports of teenage riots during screenings. In the United States, many local theaters quietly trimmed the soundtrack or muted portions of dialogue. Today, the Blackboard Jungle is recognized as a daring turning point. It gave birth to both rock rebellion and social realism in American cinema. The very scenes that terrified adults were the ones that inspired a generation. What society called dangerous, the youth called truth. Number 8. Suddenly, Last Summer, 1959. Joseph L. Mankiewicz's Suddenly Last Summer arrived shrouded in whispers. Adapted from Tennessee Williams's play, it featured Elizabeth Taylor, Katharine Hepburn, and Montgomery Clift in a Southern Gothic story of madness, repression, and family power. Columbia Pictures thought it was prestigious. The censors saw it as poison. The original screenplay included shocking implications of moral corruption and psychological breakdown. When the Production Code Office reviewed it, they demanded massive cuts. Scenes describing what happened last summer were rewritten and visualized only through suggestion. Yet even the restrained version stunned audiences with its audacity. Behind the scenes, tension was unbearable. Clift's health was fragile. Hepburn nearly walked off the set, and Taylor fought to preserve the story's integrity. Mankiewicz shot alternate takes knowing some would never pass review. The Uncut version screened privately in Europe, and critics there hailed it as one of the boldest American films of the decade. American audiences got a tamed release. Still, the performances were so intense that reviewers called it unsettling. The National Legion of Decency condemned it entirely. Columbia pulled it from some markets, but its reputation grew through word of mouth. Over time, historians restored missing footage, revealing how brutally the story had been edited. The restored version turned from confusion into art, dark, poetic, and fearless. Suddenly, Last Summer reminded viewers that the real horror lies not in monsters, but in the secrets families bury. Number 7. The Night of the Hunter, 1955. Charles Laughton's The Night of the Hunter was unlike any other film of its time, a nightmare fairy tale disguised as Americana. Robert Mitchum played Reverend Harry Powell, a preacher-turned-killer who stalks 2 children for stolen money. The film's imagery was haunting, dreamlike, and morally terrifying. Audiences in the 1950s did not know how to handle it. Critics were divided, some calling it blasphemous. The mix of violence, religious symbolism, and psychological terror shocked censors. United Artists trimmed portions of the ending, fearing it was too disturbing for family audiences. The uncut version that Laughton envisioned was considered unreleasable in America. Behind the scenes, the production was chaos. Laughton's artistic direction confused studio executives. Mitchum's portrayal of evil was so convincing that test audiences walked out. The studio panicked and cut sections to lighten the tone. When it finally premiered, it failed at the box office, and Laughton never directed again. Years later, critics rediscovered the original footage preserved in foreign archives. What they found was a lost masterpiece. Its surreal lighting, its moral contrasts, and its childlike terror were decades ahead of their time. Today, The Night of the Hunter is recognized as one of the greatest American films ever made. It dared to mix beauty with horror, innocence with corruption, and faith with fear. The uncut version reveals what censors once hid, a vision so pure and unsettling, it could only belong to a misunderstood genius. Number 6. The Defiant Ones, 1958. When Stanley Kramer released The Defiant Ones, the world was still divided by prejudice. The film forced audiences to confront that division head-on. Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier played escaped convicts, one white, one black, chained together and on the run. The premise alone made studios nervous. America was not ready for equality on screen. From its first frame, it was controversial. Southern states banned it outright, calling it inflammatory. Theater owners feared riots. The production code demanded the removal of dialogue that hinted at racial empathy. Even its advertising was censored in some regions, where posters showing Curtis and Poitier side by side were Forbidden. Behind the camera, Kramer fought tirelessly to protect his vision. He shot alternate takes for scenes involving physical closeness between the two men, anticipating censorship in different territories. The uncut European release was longer by nearly 6 minutes, showing raw exchanges of mistrust that grew into reluctant respect. American audiences got a sanitized cut. Critics were divided. Some praised its bravery, others called it propaganda. But when Poitier received an Oscar nomination, the first ever for a black actor in that category, it proved that Hollywood's walls were beginning to crack. In later years, the restored version revealed what had been lost, dialogue that dared to show mutual humanity. The Defiant Ones remains a time capsule of courage. Its story of two men learning to see each other as equals still echoes today. The censors tried to silence compassion, but compassion outlived them. Number 5. The Searchers, 1956. John Ford's The Searchers was both a Western and an autopsy of American myth. Audiences came expecting heroism. They got obsession and moral decay. John Wayne's Ethan Edwards returned from war to find his family murdered and his niece kidnapped by Comanche warriors. His mission to rescue her became a descent into hatred. Censors struggled with its violence and racial politics. Scenes of massacre and implied brutality were cut from the theatrical release. Ford's original print contained longer takes of burning homesteads and the psychological toll on Ethan, images that the studio believed too disturbing. In Britain, the film was trimmed by over 2 minutes. Behind the scenes, Wayne questioned Ford's decision to make his character so cold and unforgiving. Ford reportedly told him that America needed to see its reflection no matter how ugly. Warner Brothers feared backlash from both conservative audiences and Native American groups. When the uncut footage resurfaced decades later, it revealed an even darker film. Ford had crafted an allegory of vengeance and emptiness far removed from the glory of traditional Westerns. Critics now consider it one of the most complex films ever made about racism and obsession. At the time, many missed the message. But The Searchers was the first major American movie to admit that sometimes the hero is the villain. Its cuts made it safer, but its spirit stayed dangerous. It turned the Western from fantasy into confession. Number 4. East of Eden, 1955. Elia Kazan's East of Eden introduced the world to James Dean, and with him the raw pulse of youth rebellion. Adapted from John Steinbeck's novel, it told the story of two brothers struggling for their father's love in the shadow of jealousy and moral judgment. When previewed, censors immediately demanded changes. Scenes that hinted at moral conflict were deemed too intense. The uncut version contained emotional breakdowns and confrontations that pushed actors to the brink. Brothers feared Dean's performance was too real, too uncontrollable. They trimmed entire sequences of his character's violent outbursts and moments of tenderness that blurred the moral lines. Behind the scenes, Kazan and Dean clashed. The director demanded structure. Dean wanted chaos. Their tension became the film's heartbeat. On-set crew members recalled that Dean would improvise entire scenes, leaving others speechless. The studio considered re-editing to tame him. The trimmed theatrical release was still powerful, but the uncut reels later restored in foreign archives revealed a masterpiece. The emotional weight was heavier, the silences longer, the pain more human. At the time, critics were divided between awe and discomfort. Many parents viewed Dean as a dangerous symbol corrupting post-war youth. But history had its own verdict. East of Eden became a generational statement. The uncut version showed what Hollywood tried to suppress. That authenticity can be more explosive than any scandal. Number 3. The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957. David Lean's The Bridge on the River Kwai looked like a grand war epic about duty and survival. But beneath its sweeping scope lay a quiet act of rebellion. Based on Pierre Boulle's novel, it followed British prisoners of war forced by the Japanese to build a bridge in Burma under the obsessive leadership of Colonel Nicholson, played by Alec Guinness. Audiences saw heroism, but censors saw something else. The film's original cut included extended scenes showing prisoner starvation and brutality. These were trimmed for American theaters, which feared the violence would damage the studio's family-friendly reputation. British authorities demanded edits, too, arguing that the depiction of officers cooperating with enemies was unpatriotic. Behind the scenes, the tension was immense. Lean fought Columbia Pictures over the pacing and tone. Guinness himself argued that Nicholson's moral collapse should remain intact, but the studio insisted on softening him. The uncut international version portrayed him as delusional, a man who confuses honor with vanity. The theatrical version turned him into a tragic hero instead. Crew members recalled that the editing process nearly destroyed Lean's trust in studios. Yet despite its cuts, the film won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Over time, film historians unearthed the missing material, restoring Lean's original moral ambiguity. In its complete form, The Bridge on the River Kwai is not about victory but madness. It reminds us that even in triumph, humanity can lose its soul. What the censors once feared was the truth of war itself, that obsession can wear a uniform. Number 2. Rebel Without a Cause, 1955. Nicholas Ray's Rebel Without a Cause was not just a film, it was a generational confession. James Dean as Jim Stark became the face of post-war teenage despair. Beneath its vibrant color and youthful energy was an ache that frightened adults. The original screenplay was even darker. It contained stronger depictions of family conflict and isolation. When censors read it, they demanded heavy revisions. Warner Brothers cut scenes showing mental breakdowns and softened the ending. The uncut version hinted at deeper tragedy, including extended moments of grief after the planetarium showdown. Behind the camera, Nicholas Ray battled studio executives to protect Dean's performance. Ray encouraged improvisation and emotional vulnerability that felt too real for the era. Dean's raw energy frightened conservative critics, who saw him as a symbol of rebellion. The studio removed moments that blurred lines between friendship and obsession, fearing they would fuel controversy. When released, it became an instant sensation, but also a lightning rod. Schools banned posters. Politicians blamed it for delinquency. Some countries refused to screen it at all. Yet despite all that, its influence spread like wildfire. Decades later, archivists discovered footage that revealed an even more complex story, a portrait of broken families, not delinquent youth. Rebel Without a Cause captured the loneliness behind the suburban dream. The cuts could not kill its heartbeat. Its unspoken pain became the anthem of a generation that refused to stay quiet. Number 1. Some Like It Hot, 1959. Billy Wilder's Some Like It. Hot closed the decade with laughter, but it was laughter that terrified censors. Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon played musicians who disguised themselves as women to escape mobsters, while Marilyn Monroe embodied freedom and sensual chaos as sugarcane. The premise alone set alarms ringing. The production code deemed it too risque. Religious groups condemned it before release. Wilder refused to alter a frame. United Artists decided to bypass the code entirely, making Some Like It Hot, one of the first major American films released without approval. Behind the scenes, the production was chaos. Monroe's unpredictable behavior made shooting difficult, but her vulnerability gave the film its heart. Curtis joked that kissing her was like kissing Hitler, a remark that fueled endless rumors and tabloid frenzy. In foreign markets, different versions existed. Some countries removed the finale entirely, claiming its humor challenged traditional values. The uncut version contained subtle moments of identity and freedom that were radical for their time. Audiences loved it anyway. Critics hailed its energy, wit, and courage. It grossed millions and proved that the code was dying. By refusing to obey censorship, Wilder shattered the last barrier of the 1950s. In the end, Some Like It Hot was more than a comedy. It was a farewell to repression and a doorway to liberation. The world laughed, but deep down, it knew something irreversible had begun. The 1950s looked polite on the surface, but these films told another story. A world cracking beneath control. Each banned frame was a cry for honesty. These directors risked everything so cinema could finally grow up. Which of these uncut masterpieces do you think was the boldest rebellion? Let your thoughts light up the comments. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more forgotten chapters of film history where truth dared to speak, even when forbidden.